Hello, this is Bird again. I was about to do a reading of this book. I know I keep teasing it at this point, but first I wanted to just show off my room because I feel like I got some cool stuff. Like, we got Johnny Depp over there. Those are some rules on how to survive the zombie apocalypse. Then you got this one right here. That's an art piece I made, and those aren't lines. Those black things. That says Birdman, like about 1,000,000 times. Let's look at it. It took a while. Then, if we look over here, we got this picture, my guitar, another art piece I did, one of my dream catchers. Then let's come over here. We got some of this stuff. Wait. Yeah, we got all this. Then we come over here. Another dream catcher. Wait, I'm trying to figure out where the camera is. Then we got all this over here. I'm recording this on my phone. That's why the quality is not as good as it should be. Then we got more stuff. And then, are you ready for this? All that. Actually, there's more in here. I need to reset it up. But, yeah. And then, yeah, I guess now I should do the reading. But I just wanted to show all that off real quick. This is Portrait of a Killer. Oh, wait. That's not pointing at me. My bad. I thought it was pointing at me. Portrait of a Killer. Jack the Ripper. Case closed. I'm gonna see how far it is for chapter 1. 28 pages. Okay. Chapter 1. Mr. Nobody. Monday, August 6th, 1888, was a bank holiday in London. The city was a carnival of wondrous things to do for as little as pennies, if one could spare a few. Well, keep in mind, back in 1888, a few pennies was actually a bunch. The bell of Windsor's Parish Church in St. George's Chapel rang throughout the day. Ships were dressed in flags, and royal salutes boomed from cannons to celebrate the Duke of Edinburgh's 44th birthday. Fascinating. The Crystal Palace offered a dazzling spectrum of special programs, organ recitals, military band concerts, a monster display of fireworks, a grand fairy ballet, ventriloquist, ventriloquist, and world-famous minstrel performances. Madame Tussauds featured a special wax model of Frederick II lying in state, and of course the ever-popular Chamber of Horrors. That reminds me of American Horror Story. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Other delicious horrors awaited those who could afford theater tickets and were in the mood for a morality play or just a good old-fashioned fright. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde were playing two sold-out houses. The famous American actor Richard Mansfield was brilliant as Jekyll and Hyde at Henry Irving's Lyceum, and the opera comic had its version too, although poorly reviewed and in the midst of a scandal because the theater had adapted Robert Louis Stevenson's novel without permission. Oh, so they got copyrighted, so they probably sued the fuck out of them. On this bank holiday, there were more horse and cattle shows, specials, cheap rates on trains, and the bazaars in Covent Garden. Oh yeah, this is in England, right? Because Jack the Ripper, so I don't really know all these locations. Were overflowing with Sheffield plates, gold jewelry, used military uniforms. If one wanted to pretend to be a soldier on this relaxed but rowdy day, he could do so with little expense and no questions asked. Or one could impersonate a copper by renting an authentic Metropolitan Police uniform from Angel's theatrical costumes in Camden Town, a scarcely 2-mile stroll from where the handsome Walter Richard Strickard lived. 28-year-old Strickard had given up his obscure acting career for the higher calling of art. I think I read to page 4 already, and I'm pretty sure what they're trying to say is that Strickard was Jack the Ripper, but they don't have any proof of that. Or at least by page 4 is what I figured out. Oh, where was I? I got distracted. 28-year-old Strickert had given up his obscure acting career for the higher calling of art. He was a painter and etcher, a student of James McNeill Whistler, and a disciple of Edgar Degas. Young Strickert was himself a work of art. Slender, with a strong upper body from swimming and perfectly angled nose and jaw, thick, wavy blonde hair, and blue eyes that were as indestructible and penetrating as his secret thoughts and piercing mind. One might almost have called him pretty, except for his mouth, which could narrow into a hard, cruel line. His precise height is unknown, but a friend of his described him as a little above average, so like 5'8" is what I would say. Photographs and several items of clothing donated to the Tate Gallery. Wait, no, but this is in the 1800s, late 1900s, so like the average height for a man back then was like 5'5", because people have gotten taller throughout history, so therefore the average height back then was like a foot lower, pretty much. Anyway, where was I? Photographs and several items of clothing donated to the Tate Gallery archive in the 1980s suggest he was probably 5'8" or 9. Strickert was fluent in German, English, French, and Italian. What a tryhard. He knew Latin well enough to teach it to friends, and he was well acquainted with Danish and Greek, and possibly knew a smattering of Spanish and Portuguese, so he was bilingual, really bilingual. He was said to read the classics in the original languages, but he didn't always finish a book once he started it. I do that too, dude. It wasn't uncommon to find dozens of novels strewn about, open to the last page that had snagged his interest. Mostly, Strickert was addicted to newspapers, tabloids, and journals, so the average American. Until his death in 1942, his studios and studies looked like a recycling center for just about every bit of newsprint to roll off the European presses. One might ask how any hard-working person could find time to go through 4, 5, 6, 10 newspapers a day, but Strickert had a method. He didn't bother with what didn't interest him, so he didn't read the whole thing. Whether it was politics, economics, world affairs, wars, or people, nothing mattered to Strickert unless it somehow affected Strickert. Technically, that's smart, though. He usually preferred to read about the latest entertainment, to come to town, to scrutinize art critics, to turn quickly to any story about crime, and to search for his own name if there was any reason it might be in print on any given day. He was fond of letters to the editor, especially ones he wrote and signed with a pseudonym. Big word, Pseudonyym, however you want. I don't know what that means. Y'all can look it up. Strickert relished knowing what other people were doing, especially in the privacy of their own not always so tidy Victorian lives. Right. He would beg his friends to tell me in detail all sorts of things that have amused you, and how and when or where, and all sorts of gossip about everyone. Strickert despised the upper class. He was a star stalker. That's a bad thing, I think. But no, I think that just means he followed, like, celebrities. He somehow managed to hobnob with the major celebrities of the day. Oh, I was right. Henry Irving and Ellen Terry. Well, I kind of knew that. I've read to page 4. This is page 3. Where was I? Ellen Terry, Audrey Bradley. I don't know any of these people. Henry James, Max Beerbohm, Oscar Wilde, I've heard that name, Monet, Ronier, Pusari, Rodin, Andre Gide, Edouard Desjardins, Proust, members of Parliament, but he did not necessarily know many of them. Okay, and no one famous or otherwise ever really knew him. Not even his first wife, Ellen, who would turn 40 in less than 2 weeks. Strickert may not have even given much thought to his wife's birthday on this bank holiday, but it was extremely unlikely he had forgotten it. He was much admired for his amazing memory. Throughout his life, he would amuse dinner guests by performing long passages in musicals and plays. Dressed for the parts, his recitations or something like that, flawless. Stricker would not have forgotten that Ellen's birthday was August 18th, and a very easy occasion to ruin. Oh, maybe he would forget, quotations, maybe he would vanish into one of his secret rented hovels that he called studios. Maybe he would take Ellen to a romantic cafe in Soho and leave her alone at the table while he dashed off to a music hall, then stayed out the rest of the night. Ellen loved Stricker all her sad life. Despite his cold heart, his pathological lying, his self-centeredness, and his habit of disappearing for days, even weeks, without warning or explanation. Walter Stricker was an actor by nature more than any virtue of inflatement. He lived on the center stage of his secret, fantasy-driven life, and was just as comfortable moving about unnoticed in the deep shadows of isolated streets as he was in the midst of throbbing crowds. He had a great range of voice and was a master of guise paint and wardrobe. So gifted at disguise was he that as a boy he often went about unrecognized by his neighbors and family. Let's leave it there. He's a spy. Are you intrigued? I hope so. I just mainly want to stop because my throat's feeling dry. I feel like y'all can hear that a little bit. I hope y'all are entertained. And bye. This has been Birdman.